Let's get straight to the point here. Successful athletes set goals, and they should. All successful athletes set goals. I'll rephrase that. All athletes who have been successful will have been working towards goals. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to look at two things. Initially, we're going to have a look at the role. Why did that seem so hard to say? The role of goal setting. Why was that hard to say? The role of goal setting. So we're going to do that first, and afterwards I'm going to look at the SMART methodology of actually setting goals. But let's get into this role of goal setting first of all. I want you to look at this word carefully and stick to it. It's a principle. Adherence. People who set goals, athletes who are working towards goals, they adhere to training. They adhere to the regimen and regime that they are expected to undertake. It's an important concept. So adherence to what is meant to be done and will be functional and will work for them. Secondly, having goals motivates. Okay, it motivates performers, not least because it clarifies for them what they are looking to achieve. Thirdly, goals can set what we might refer to as baselines. Okay, so we are here, we want to get there. Goal setting allows us to establish where we are now, the baseline. Fourthly, goals are really great for progress tracking. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, if we are working towards a specific thing, we'll come to that in a second, and it's measurable, we'll come to that in a second, we can measure where we are right now. Are we on the journey to getting there? So it allows us to actually judge things like training quality. Are we on the path that's going to lead to success? And finally, goal setting leads to efficiency. In other words, everything that is done for a purpose and towards a certain end. That makes time and the usage of time much more efficient than on average. Now, that's all well and good. What we are going to do is we are going to have a look at the SMART principle. So let me write this down on this. I don't like teaching from acronyms generally, but this one's is unavoidable because it is by nature an acronym. We're going to look at the SMART principle. Now, the S of this SMART is what we refer to as specific. Goals must be specific, but specific to what? I'm going to argue here that a goal that is set must be specific to something like components of fitness. Okay? So we might set a goal to increase flexibility or agility, or it could be that we're making our goal specific to our sport, or we're making our goal, or someone else's goal, specific to their position in that sport, especially if it's a team game, for example. And it could be that we're making our goal specific to something like an energy system. And that will seem kind of a bit vague at this point because it's either aerobic or anaerobic. Well, there's a bit more nuance to that when we get a bit further in our studies, okay? But our training must be targeting some of these concepts. So let's just step back from that a second. A gymnast is going to specifically train to increase things like power and flexibility from the components of fitness. A goalkeeper might train differently to a striker in, let's say, football, a back and a forward in rugby, another example, okay? And we might look to, and by the way, probably got another important one here. It could even relate to body part. You can imagine, for example, that a hammer thrower really needs to focus a lot on core stability and the strength of the shoulder and the back. Okay, that would be a classic example. Now, the M of SMART is what we refer to as measurable. Not miserable, measurable. Now, why would we want to measure our goals? Well, first of all, critical term here is it makes the output objective. Did we achieve the thing? We know because we either got that measure or we didn't. So what would they be? They would be things like a time. Think back like a personal best. They would be a percentage. Really should turn my phone off. They would be things like a ratio. So think, for example, and also what I'll throw in here, it could well be a fitness test score. So let me take this last one as our example. We mentioned a gymnast. The gymnast wants to increase their flexibility by improving their sit and reach test score by 3% over 6 weeks or something like that. It is measurable. That's the point. Let's look at the A. In terms of the A, let me do a nice blue here, blue to purple. A is what we refer to as achievable. Achievable. I'm not sure I agree that is actually nice, but anyway, let's carry on. Achievable. The goal must be in reach. It must not be so elevated and out of reach that the person doesn't believe they can do it. And a nice way to think about this is it should be challenging, like a real lovely challenge that they believe they can do. Challenge, but can be done. So did you notice before with the gymnast I said did I say 3%? A 3% improvement on the sit and reach test score. Depending on the start point, that probably will feel achievable. If it had been a 50% improvement, a whatever, it becomes a bit silly. Or let's use fitness test results again. Think about whatever your last multi-stage fitness test score was, whether it was 5 or 7 or 12 or whatever. If you had 6 or 12 weeks, say, to improve it by 1.5 full levels, you probably feel that was achievable. Is it challenging, though? And of course, that's individual for different people. Now, this one is an interesting one. They tell us that the R is realistic. Fine, I'm going to tell you that the R is realistic. I'm just going to tell you that realistic means it's achievable, basically. So it's realistic. It must be achieved. I'm not going to get into it here because this is what I need to teach you here to tell you this SMART principle. Just be aware that other users of the SMART principle use a different R. I'll just mention it that way. It's not for now, but there you go. Now then, the T is interesting. This is time-bound. And I've already intimated this by saying, over 6 weeks, over 12 weeks. It means that the target must be achieved by a deadline. Okay, and that, of course, really focuses the mind. You'll know, whether it's to do with exams or whatever it happens to be, you'll know that something inevitable or something you have to do will sharpen your focus onto that thing. That there's actually some interesting psychological mechanisms as to why that happens, but that's for another time. And what we'll find is that the deadlines, or the time-bound deadline, will often be between 4 and 12 weeks. And of course, it depends on the type of athlete, depends on the level of the goal, depends on the point in the season or the year, and so on. But we'll often find that this would be quite typical. Okay, so lovely. We've got our SMART principle. We've got our reasons for goal setting, our role of goal setting, I should say, up here. Thanks.